I first looked at the Cassiar data just under 2 years ago, I guess, and what was fairly obvious to me was the potential for significant high-grade vein systems. That's a 15-kilometre long zone, and there are numerous veins, few of which have been mined in the past. And the average grade of those veins that were previously mined was better than 15 grams. There's extremely good infrastructure. It's easy to operate. It's low-cost exploration. I really think the potential for multi-million ounce deposits in this district is quite high. Orogenic vein camps are somewhat underestimated, but certainly have potential to add ounces quickly simply because of grade. So if you are fortunate enough to tie up a whole district, which is what Cassiar have done, I think the upside is really exciting.
Very scarce gold deposits, especially in Canada. Sea is a very attractive environment for mining companies. They've been at this for a long time. They offer some great opportunities, access. Relationships with the First Nations are extremely positive. As these deposits are being depleted, any kind of reserve or deposit that has access to infrastructure like we do at Cassiar becomes extremely attractive.
This is a huge land position, 100% owned by the company. It's a 25 by 25 kilometer block that encompasses an entire mining district. The South Cassiar area is, of course, where the higher grades are, where there's been a significant historical production with visible gold, similar in style to some of the vein systems you see in the Barkerville District. There's an analogy here to Fosterville here too, where we have such very high grade. The North Cassiar area here, you can see hosts the Taurus deposit, which is our bulk zone with lots of potential to expand and to infill to find high-grade mineralization corridors along that in a near-surface environment.
Kind of our, key investment highlights. We do have a foundational resource that is growing, surrounded by infrastructure, so it ticks, all the boxes there's, that you want to tick. We are still quite undervalued, so it's a very attractively valued opportunity that is led by truly a world-class team, and more importantly, it has a multi-million ounce potential, district-scale potential, and we're very excited to be looking to prove that up.
Hello, everybody. My name's David Rhys, and I'm going to be presenting to you about the technical aspects of Cassiar Gold's Cassiar Project in northern British Columbia, which we believe is a very prospective exploration project which already has an important resource base to it. You can see Cassiar on this map of British Columbia is on the northern central part of BC. It is part of a district or belt, I should say, of orogenic gold deposits that extend through eastern British Columbia. You can see here outlined, which includes the Caribou district of the Barkerville District, which is currently going into production with several million ounces in resources and historical production, and also the company's that is Cassiar Gold Sheep Creek district down in through here as well, which is not currently a focus of the company, but the company is planning on future exploration there. So we're going to focus on the Cassiar district, and as mentioned, this is all part of a belt in eastern British Columbia, which is a classic orogenic belt in which there are oceanic rocks in through here, ophiolites we call them, which sit between some of these large terrains in green here, which were accreted onto Western North America. It's one of two belts in British Columbia. It's the younger 140 or older 140 to 120 million year old belt. You can see there's the coastal belt here too, which includes the Braylorn district and some of the deposits in the southeastern Alaska, including Core Mining's Kensington deposit. So we'll focus on the district here. You can see it's a very large district. The map here, the scale is 10 kilometers. So this is the property outline. It's about 25 by 25 kilometers, contiguous property. So we have here an entire mining district, and it has very good infrastructure. You can see the red line running right through the middle here is the Stewart-Cassiar Highway, the main connecting highway between British Columbia and the Yukon. And then branching off that is the paved road to the historic Cassiar town site. And then all these other roads you see on here in these squiggly red lines are access roads on the property. So this property has road access to all the major prospects, which is very unusual in British Columbia. The terrain here is much more forgiving than much of British Columbia. And so there's a lot of infrastructure advantages in transportation. And also you can see on here some of the historic producers on the property. These producers here you see in South Cassiar, Maine, Volog, Cusac, and Bain produced between, as you can see in the lower left, about 1979 up until the mid 2000s. So these are all pretty recent areas of underground development, which are still potentially reopenable and in good condition. They are a ramp and trackless access. So, so very good infrastructure to provide platforms for exploration or for access for future underground mining, since there's resources on the extensions of many of the veins in here. You can see the historic production from these mines, 350,000 ounces at grades of between about 10 and 20 grams. So it's very high grade vein systems. And also too, further to the north, you see the historic producing Taurus mine, which produced 220,000 tons at 4 grams for 35,000 ounces. So essentially acts almost like a bulk tonnage sampling of the Taurus deposit here, which is the extension of that to the west, where the company has over 1 million ounces in resources. So very good infrastructure through here. And additional prospects, a few of which I've shown on here, the Lucky, Snow Creek, Pete, Hunter, and Teresa, which are all also road accessible on the property or close to road accessible, and are either extensions of the same belt in the center here, which you can see that over a 15-kilometer trend hosts most of the zones, or include additional prospects and potential belts which lie in other parts of the property. So you can see here a view looking from the northern part of the property southward. Here's the Taurus deposit I just mentioned in the valley below. And there's the main mine area, which is on South Cassiar District. You can see a note shown on here as sort of division through the valley between South and North Cassiar. And look at the topography. It's very, very accessible. Even the areas on South Cassiar on Table Mountain here, you can see the topography is very accessible. There's road access up to these portals. There's a road access that goes up the hillside here and on the other side to the Cusac and Bain areas on the other side there. And the Taurus deposit lies just down in the flat valley here. It outcrops. There's almost no overburden on top of it. And same with the former Taurus mine area. So all very, very good infrastructure and access through this area. And the other thing to note is that the photograph is taken on a ridge here where we're standing on the Lucky prospect. So you can see between the Lucky prospect where we're standing and the Taurus deposit, there's almost a kilometer of vertical height. And in that area, as we'll see in the cross sections, there's prospective targets for there being stacked zones of mineralization. So there's a significant vertical component here that adds to the prospectivity of this district, where there's potential for multiple stacked styles of mineralization on the property. The other important thing too is that the mill that produced the mineralization that I was mentioning earlier, the 350,000 ounces, is still serviceable. It's sitting here. It was 300 ton per day mill. It's sitting just in the valley in the middle here. You can see there's the tailings facility around it, and the mill itself is in good shape. It was last refurbished by Hawthorne Gold in the late 2000s, ready for production at that time. So it provides the potential of the company, if there's more discoveries of some of the high grade veins on the South Cassiar area, for near-term production, which could offset exploration costs and potentially make Cassiar Gold a producer fairly quickly. So all of these prospects on the south here, the principal ones lie in still an active mining lease, and Taurus is also an active mining lease as well. So again, there's potential for near-term production, certainly for the high grade. Taurus itself, we'd look at potentially, obviously, a larger type of operation once any economic reserves or resources are defined within that. And we'll talk about that shortly. So you can see here the geology of the property. Here's the property up in the upper right, and a bit of a focus here on the left. In the upper right, you can see the outline here of some of the units in green are mafic volcanic rocks, classic host rocks to orogenic gold deposits, which are interlayered in these purple colors and gray colors with various different intrusive rocks, ultramafic rocks, and also sediments in gray. So this is essentially an orogenic gold belt, like you would consider for the Abitibi or the Mother Lode Belt in California, sort of tipped on its side, where the stratigraphy is relatively flat lying here. But nonetheless, it's the same type of geology and the same type of controls on vein systems. On the left here, you can see the detail, and you can see all these veins here in red, all these little red lines here trending east-northeast are veins in known prospects and in historical mining areas. Here's South Cassiar, here's the Taurus area. So these vein systems dominantly trend east-northeast. They're dominantly steeply dipping, and they are developed mainly in mafic volcanic rocks between these packages of sediments and ultramafic strands. So you see some of the geology here. On the upper right, you can see the main rock units. Here's the mafic volcanic rocks, which are the main host to the mineralization, classic pillowed to massive basalts. And those are interlayered with these other units I was just mentioning, the carbonaceous sediments in the upper right, and also the ultramafic rocks. Here you hear altered to liswonite, which is a carbonate fuchsite or mariposite alteration of ultramafic units. Where that alteration intensifies, we know we're getting close to hydrothermal alteration outside or mineralization outside of those areas of alteration. We get those units, those ultramafic units altered to talc chlorite. So talc and chlorite are very weak units, as are sediments. So these units act essentially as shear zones. You can see there's strong foliation localized in these. And so they are acting as low angle shear zones between which there are brittle mafic volcanic units which host the veins. So it's a classic rheological contrast where there's a shear zone control on focusing the mineralization. You can see here's the orientations of the veins. The veins form these north-northwest trending corridors, and there's a good reason for that. Not to get too technical, but there's a very strong lineation here that trends north-northwest. It's the transportation direction of some of these low-angle thrusts that localize along the sediments and the liswonites, and the veins are forming perpendicular to that in a classic geometry you see in orogenic districts, and I'll show you in the next slides here. So there's that lineation trend, and you can see here in the upper right is a block model showing the distribution of the veins. The north is to the right, upper right here. And you can see the mafic volcanics are in the various greens here. And between them are in purple ultramafic units, and the gray are sediments. So the veins are in red, and you can see how these low angle thrusts localizing along the ultramafic units, top to the north-northwest transportation, have these branching veins which are accommodating some of the displacement across some of these units. So these are linkage features between some of these thrusts. And so most of the mineralization at Cassiar was mined in these types of veins. So this is a very similar geometry, for example, to what you see at the Beta Hunt mine in Western Australia, where some very high-grade gold came from last year. And it's also the same geometry we see in the Abitibi, but just kind of tipped on its side. So if you turn this 90 degrees and all these ultramafic units and ultramafic units were vertical, this would be very much like Val d'Or, like the Sigma-Lamaque mine in Val d'Or, where you have a series of stacked vein systems that would just be one on top of each other within a more competent unit. So very, very classic style of mineralization we see. And you can see in an outcrop, there's that lineation trend, and there's the orientation of some of the extensional veins, the opposite direction that comes off that lineation. So you can see why the lineation is important. It allows us to track out these corridors of repeated veins, one after another. And what's really important on this map, looking at these flat-lying units, south of Bain and Cusac, for example, we get to sediments and other units that sit above some of the principal areas of vein development. So underneath these units, which aren't very thick in these areas, there's the potential to find additional veins along these corridors. And similarly, over in some of the other prospects to the east here, you can see some veins shown in here. There's potential for tracking out additional parallel veins here. So here's a schematic section to the property demonstrating that concept. You can see the in the middle here is the main mine in Volag and the Cusac area, where in South Cassiar there was most of the historic underground production, and then the Taurus area up to the north. And in gray are these sediment units, and in purple are the ultramafics. And so there's that gently dipping stratigraphy where you can see these sediments and ultramafics are acting as thrust surfaces, and the veins developing in blue, the known veins in between these. And you can see some of the targets, the conceptual targets we have for stacked mineralization. We know that stacking is occurring, for example, because in the Cassiar south area, in the main mine, we already can see it. There's historical production on some of the veins in the main mine produced between two of these mafic units with a thrust in between. And similarly over here to the east in the Taurus area, the mineralization at Taurus is very similar to the prospect in Lucky and some of the veins on the ridge here. So we know they're stacking all the way down. And so this has never really been explored for before. So forms very important targets in the area to look at the three-dimensional component here. So highly prospective area. Most of the exploration historically was concentrated in the areas of the known veins and mines. So a lot of areas outside of that have seen very little exploration. Here's now some of the styles of the mineralization and prospectivity you see in the South Cassiar area. This is a detail showing here's the main mine, Volag and Cusac and Bain, with some of the production shown with the very high grades you can see here in some of these numbers. The veins have that east-northeast to east-west trend I was talking about. The blue lines are just late faults. They're not important on here, but you can see the patterns of the veins in through here show us that we have these corridors, which again, here's the Bain, Cusac area. We have the potential with some of the other veins here for repeated veins along these corridors. And also in between the area of Bain, Cusac, and the main mine, there's almost no drilling. This is on the ridge top in between, so the overlying units are a bit thicker here. So the drilling hasn't reached to the levels of the most prospective veins in the middle, in the almost 2 kilometers that lie in between these areas. There's potential too, because there's all this underground workings in the historic mines here are potentially accessible for if we find potential for new veins or in upcoming drilling, identify new veins to reopen the underground and use it as a platform for drilling horizontal holes in between to test out for additional veins. You can see what these veins historically looked like in the lower left. Here's one of the veins in the main mine, classic orogenic gold quartz vein with banding in it, with stylites in it that are pyrite bearing and carbonaceous in some places, with carbonate pyrite alteration, and a lot of little veins around which expand the width of the mineralized areas. In the lower left, you can see the high-grade gold that comes from many of these veins. A lot of visible gold came from these vein systems, very, very high grade. There's some assertions that potentially some of the production was understated because of the collection of visible gold from some of these areas too. There's still resources on some of these veins, like the Bain vein system here. You can see in historical resources, the company still has to do additional work to validate those and potentially be able to expand them too. You can see this 20,000 tons in the Bain vein here of 16 grams. Historically indicated, and another additional inferred mineralization as well too. So there's also in the Cusac vein system, 33,000 tons, 16 grams. So very good grades. And really you can see on the plan view here, the drill traces that are very, very focused to the area of the historic mining. So the drill traces are in this pale gray color. And there's very little drilling along strike from these veins at all. And again, very little testing of the stacked potential in some of these areas above and below some of these veins. So lots of room to grow here. Same with the main mine here, where there's also historical resources as well. Here's some of the concepts of how to explore some of these areas. You can see in the upper right, this is the main mine that was historically mined. So the areas in red are previously mined veins. You can see one of the veins here, the Jenny vein, sits within a mafic unit here. That's the green on the drill traces here, between these two purple ultramafic units and sediments. And then there's additional veins underneath. So that stacking is clearly demonstrated here. And this is the concept on the lower left from the basis of reviewing the mine plans and looking at the geology in the area, where we have these veins that peel off these thrusts. You can see that the Jenny vein starts off parallel to it and rolls over with a steep orientation. This apparent normal shear sense you see on here is typical of a accommodation features in low angle thrust belts. So it's not suggesting you're in an extensional environment, but you can see that the veins are linking between these ultramafic units. And where there are veins present, there's changes in the morphology of the contact here that we can use to look for veins below. So you can see that the veins themselves are causing offsets of the contact. This is a bulk-tonnage style effects, an accommodation feature between rheologically competent units here in the mafics and the weaker units on either side. So looking for those variations in the orientation and the morphology of the contact tell us about where the veins peel off those below. Plus also in this listwonite unit, this ultramafic unit I mentioned earlier, it's carbonate altered in the areas where the veins are developed and less carbonate altered distant to that. It's chloride altered distant. So we can use the presence of the alteration in the listwonite units to basically vector in to where the veins may lie beneath in the mafic volcanics. Here's what some of the veins look like underground in the Cusac area. You can see this is the Bain vein system here. Nice looking vein, nice classic orogenic gold vein with carbonate sericate alteration on its envelopes. Central vein here in the middle with all these extensional veins coming off it. Looking up at the back here and some of the underground development from Hawthorne Gold just 12 years ago. You can see that these smaller veins also add to the width of the mineralized zone and carry gold themselves. And here's the Volag vein that came to surface. These things are, again, they have that northerly dip which rolls to vertical, and classic sample of Volag here with all these beautiful stylolites in it, along which gold can be present. This is all carbonaceous material and stylolite. So a classic sort of an orogenic gold shear vein. And you can see in the upper right, there's some of the types of veins that we'd look for in some of these areas. And the general style of development. So this is the model again. I won't belabor this, but you can see the shear zones, low angle shear zones here, a small version of what's going on in the left here. There's a shear zone coming along. It's rolling to a steep dip and a vein is peeling off it. So you see the vein has got this horsetail geometry upward to join this shear zone. So this geometry is very apparent at all scales, and we can use it to track out where the veins lie. So here's again some of the mineralization. Very high grade mineralization here. You can see all the coarse gold here associated with some of the stylites here and some of the veins. And here pyrite with coarse gold. So most of this gold here in some of these veins is free gold. The remainder is in pyrite and can be liberated through cyanidation. You can see up in the center here, one of the other characteristics of these veins is that some of these are sulfosalt minerals, tetrahedrite, for example, in here. And the association with sulfosalt minerals is classic of what we call an epizonal orogenic gold deposit. It occurs in Newfound Gold's vein systems in Newfoundland, as it does in the Fosterville District in Australia as well. So it's a classic sort of epizonal style orogenic gold deposit. Some more of the targets here in the main mine, again, just to really show there's exploration potential beyond the historical mining. And you can see in the right, in the purple lines are historical drilling, and you can see how there's areas outlined here where there's either resources of unmined areas or potential to expand and link those unmined areas together to expand resources directly beside the historical underground development. So very near term potential for expansion in here. And there's other targets along strike from all of these veins. You can see that the drilling doesn't extend very far, and so there's potential to extend outward along all of these vein systems lateral to the underground development. Here's some of the conceptual targets from the underground, where we can see there's historically mined veins up here, some with still resources on them, but where there's potential for stepping of these veins with a gap in between in the sediments for additional veins on the next underlying mafic volcanic unit. So this type of periodicity again is common in the Abitibi, for example. If you turned everything at 90 degrees and it was vertical, you can see this parallelism of multiple rock units having vein systems developed in them. So these are important targets that have not been tested for here. And here you can see another concept here, the hot vein here, which has some historic resource to it, but it has never been tested where it may potentially roll to a steep dip where you have the potential for the highest continuity of mineralization. And we have some evidence that that contact is starting to roll, as I was talking about before, from some of the historical drilling. So this is one of the targets that will be drilled this year, for example. And there's so many of these targets around here that the potential for success is very high. There's just target after target with all these historic veins and areas in between that really have not been tested. You can see here's another concept for the Volog vein, potentially rolling over because it's in a deflection in the contact, and the area below in the mafic unit has never been tested. So it's just very shallow drilling here with vertical holes, which have never been tested really underneath. And again, other concepts in the Cusac area, some of the historical veins here that were mined, but also have potential for expansion of resources that lie in unmined areas and for potential for extensions of veins eastward as well. And you can see the underground development here allows you the potential for very near-term access to these veins if you were to expand resources in these areas. So there's drilling planned for all of these areas this year. And again, on the right, here's the 3D model, ultramafic unit, vein system peeling off. You can see in red here, there's more vein material out here. There's intercepts out here on the east side of Cusac, where there's an intercept of over 400 grams per ton that's open to the east out and through here. It's a narrow intercept, but nonetheless, it shows the potential for extensions of mineralization. And the Bain mine area, the same thing as well. You can see the historic resources here. There's about 40,000 tons combined in the order of about 25 grams per ton. So very, very good looking stuff. The East Bain area is where that resource is. The underground development you see in that block there is not actually existing. That was proposed development by Hawthorne Gold, who drove this decline right to this point here. So the decline is within 50 to 100 meters of accessing this, and it's a ramp access. It was just last accessed 12 years ago. And here's what the Bain vein system looks like. Classic orogenic gold, nice banded vein system, and again, potential for easy near-term access. And in between the Cusac and Bain mine areas here, you can see this large gap in between where there's potential for additional veins and extensions of veins in the underlying units beneath, which have not been tested in this area. And then the even bigger gap between the Bain, Cusac, and the main mine in between, which is about 2.5 kilometers, where there's almost no drilling in between. So there's a lot of room here. You can see that these veins have a periodicity to them. There's potentially for maybe even a couple of veins or even more in between in this gap that's never been tested. And you can see here's the underground workings on the main mine area where you could potentially drill horizontally across between some of these areas to test if you were to access that underground after proofing concept from surface holes. So looking to the north now at the Taurus area where the large low-grade bulk tonnage resource lies. So Taurus sits here right beside the historical producing underground Taurus mine, which, as I mentioned earlier, was like a bulk tonnage sample of this, which produced about 40,000 ounces of gold. And Taurus has a resource at a 0.7 gram per ton cutoff of 21.8 million tons at 1.43 grams per ton. So a decent grade of producing, or which adds up to just over 1 million ounces. But we believe there's potential to upgrade this because like with a lot of large deposits, this one has number one areas in it which are higher grade than that, which because of the drill spacing currently aren't traceable individually. So there's potential to upgrade these corridors of higher grade within it and to expand the resource that way. And secondly, the mineralization in this deposit is completely open in all directions around it. So there's a lot of potential to expand it here, which I'll demonstrate to you in the next slides here. Oops, going backwards here. So here is a plan view of the Taurus deposit. You can see the areas in the colored traces here. These are drill intercepts on drill holes, 1 to 3 grams per ton in yellow, up to 5 grams per ton in red. And you can see the areas of the resource outlines here in the dashed lines. And there's no drilling beyond these. Essentially, what you're seeing here is a drilling outline, which is shown in the lower right. Those are the positions of drill holes, which reflects the historic property position of international Taurus gold mines, and which has been the focus of subsequent campaigns because they have mineralization there. But outside of that, this whole area to the south, the mineralization is completely open. There's almost no drilling down here, but the mineralization just continues. Similarly to the north in this highway area, this mineralization, as you can see in the upper right, that photo in the upper right was taken just off the area of drilling in some of these areas where you can see these trenches shown up through here, these lines in the trees, and that mineralization has never been drilled. So this is what the style of mineralization looks like. It's these corridors of the rusty is a carbonate sericite alteration. It's an iron carbonate with disseminated pyrite around the veins, and you can see some of the veins in through here. So these form corridors of mineralization, which the veins are higher grade and contain some visible gold, and then disseminated mineralization in between them. So these collective corridors that make up the resource of the deposit. On the other side of this creek here, you can see the Taurus mine, the historical producing Taurus mine, underground mine here, which is exactly the same style of mineralization. It's just an extension of the mineralization across through here. And it is also completely open. And there's targets down to the southeast here as well. Here's what the mineralization style looks like. There's a historical small exploration at it here. Again, there's those veins sheeted with the rusty alteration around them. Visible gold in some of the veins in through here, you can see in the upper left. Sheeted sets of veins, you can see, which together provide a tool to help model this. Essentially, we can look not only at gold grade, but we can track out the mineralization corridors, looking at the distribution of the alteration in drill core, modeling that, and also looking at the density of these veins, which have these pyrite envelopes around them. So we have geological tools which can help us model and increase confidence in the distribution of mineralization. And here's some historical trenching that was done in the Taurus area. You can see the shear vein system coming up through here with the areas in the pink color is the alteration with the disseminated pyrite. See the vein systems here in outcrop. And so this is what's forming these corridors. So these, the individual vein areas in through here may run, for example, over the width of this 5 grams per ton. So it's this type of corridor that we really want to define better internal to the deposit, where you can selectively model and potentially put resource blocks and mine selectively some of these higher grade areas in the resource, which probably constitute most of the gold in the resource. You can see in the upper center, these veins also have the tetrahedrite in them, and they lie in the upper right, as you can see here in these sericitic shear zones that we can track out. Here's a longitudinal section of Taurus. Looking to the north, you can see the brown unit here. These are sediments. So this is, again, this flat-lying geology. So the mineralization sits in this white unit here in the mafic volcanic units above those sediments. And look at the distribution of drilling. In this particular section, it doesn't even reach the sediments in some areas. The mineralization is open underneath, and that's in blue. And over on the left here, one of the more prospective areas is this Taurus West shear zone, where we have this pyritic shear zone, which is dipping to the east and has carbonaceous shear zone along with disseminated mineralization all around it. There's more drilling on other sections than this, but this section demonstrates how widely spaced some of the drilling is on it. You can see the style of mineralization here, disseminated mineralization in pyrite, in these mafic volcanics with carbonate alteration, and also shear zone surfaces with carbonaceous slip surfaces, a lot of quartz veins associated in that Taurus West shear zone. And there's the longitudinal section of that Taurus West shear zone. It's got plunging mineralization, which is completely open to the south. So we're looking west here. This is one section here with some long intercepts of mineralization, 2.2 grams over 38 meters and so forth. But if you look at 3D, some of the other intercepts that are open include some higher grade intercepts like 3.05 grams over 25 meters here is just off this long section, but is completely open to the south. There's other intercepts in here of decent grade, 2.65 grams over 25 meters, for example, and through here. So the objective here is to really define better some of these 2 to 3 gram ton corridors in this area that you can see 200 meter scale has got drilling here that's quite widely spaced and open in many areas. You see this, for example, is almost a 150 meter gap between drill holes here where there's 2 grams over 40 meters that are completely open. And so by expanding these higher grade areas in the resource, we hope to upgrade the resource itself and then to also expand it into open areas. And here's some of the drilling just from last year showing that potential. For example, hole 20 TA-116 intercepted 18 meters at 5.43 grams per ton. You don't need a lot of intercepts like that to very substantially upgrade this resource in this deposit. And as I mentioned, there's the resource outline in the red on the left. It's all open. So we could very easily see this resource significantly increasing in this area. And here's some of the drilling that's planned for this year. There's about a 3,000 meter program planned for the Taurus area, really to kind of infill some of the holes in the center of the deposit in some areas, to look for those high grade corridors, to test the Taurus West area for continuity, and to test areas open to the south and the north. And really on the basis of that, then make further decisions on expanded programs in the future to keep working with this deposit. There's other targets like here down in Wings Canyon to the southeast, which are really just extensions of this whole deposit at Taurus, which just will probably connect with it once drilling is done. But you can see this exposed mineralization here with gently dipping shear veins that have carbonaceous slip surfaces just like Taurus West, and lots of vein systems in the canyon here where there was historical placer mining. So a lot of potential for expanding in all these directions here. Other targets in the area, here's Taurus, to the east is Snow Creek, and you can see in Snow Creek from these photos, very same style as Taurus mineralization, no drilling in this area at all, sampling showing gold in these veins. You can see the sheeted, steeply dipping veins in the rusty carbonate alteration here with larger veins, and through here, almost identical to Taurus and potentially extension of it, especially considering all this mineralization is open to the east. So if you look at that total footprint, if that's an extension of Taurus, we're looking at mineralization extending several kilometers, like 5 or 6 kilometers continuously, and also open to the west. And other targets in the area, we've mentioned earlier this Lucky prospect to the south up on the ridge top. And you can see looking to the north of it, still on the property, there's all these veins exposed on the ridges to the north. This is a very big system, and it has a lot of stacking of mineralization all through the area. So again, some of the other targets, Hunter Teresa to the east, which lies down to the southeast here of the South Cassiar area. Identical style of veins to the South Cassiar area, the high grade veins, and potential for them to extend under some of these sedimentary units here, which are capping the mafics that they lie within. So no testing really for that to the north. Visible gold is present in these veins and through here. And more targets like New Coast, very similar to Taurus, lying south of Wings Canyon. Lots and lots of targets in this area, very target rich environment. There's no shortage of things to drill here. So in summary, very prospective property. We have this very prospective corridor in the middle with this historic production. We have significant resources there open to expansion. All of these vein systems are part of a stack or set of veins, which there hasn't been really much vertical testing for. Many veins also lie in corridors, which we could find additional targets to the north and south in. Lots of room to grow. Doing some good geology here, trying to track those areas of alteration is one of the cheap methods that we're trying to use here. We interpret some of the historical data, and also doing the program this year where there's a 15,000 meter program currently underway, with drilling at Taurus starting about 3,000 meters, and then also drilling down here, with most of the meters derived from looking at the high grade targets in the South Cassiar area. So when the drill is finished at 3,000 meters at Taurus, it will join the other drill, which is currently drilling in South Cassiar, to continue that program, which is well underway at the moment. And just a summary, here's the stacked mineralization here. I won't go into detail on that, but really just to reinforce the potential of the property here, with that three-dimensional component to it, which hasn't really been looked at in detail before. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that presentation, and I'm sure that Marco, Jorge, and others that might be on your call with you can inform you of some of the more details of the company. Thanks very much.